This is the new Kindle Paperwhite, and this is the iPad mini 6. But which one is the better reading device? Hello, welcome back to Ellis Reviews, and thank you for subscribing if you have, and if you haven't subscribed, the button is just down there. So why compare these two devices? Because on the face of it, they're very different. This is a tablet and this is an e-reader. But I know there are a few people out there who buy the iPad mini with the sole reason for reading books on it. And when I asked the question on my YouTube community page as to whether or not I should compare the iPad mini 6 versus the Kindle Paperwhite when it comes to reading, the overwhelming answer was yes. So that's what I'm doing. We'll start as always with the pricing. I have all the numbers here. So the Kindle Paperwhite, this is the Kindle Paperwhite Signature Edition. It's the brand new one. This is the 32 gig version that also has wireless charging and no ads. When you buy Kindles, you can choose options with ads, which brings down the price a little bit, but I've never experienced it, but I think you get ads on the device itself. Don't like the idea of that. This one was £170 in the UK. You can get another version that's £179.99 with 3 months of Kindle Unlimited. There's also the normal Kindle Paperwhite. That is 8GB and it has no adjusting light sensor, no wireless charging. That's £125. And the regular Kindle, which is 8GB of storage, has a smaller screen, lower resolution, it isn't waterproof and it doesn't have wireless charging, that is just £70 at the moment. At the top end of the scale, there's the Kindle Oasis, which is £220. That has a brighter screen, it has rotating page orientation, page turn buttons, and also mobile connectivity along with Wi-Fi. These don't have the normal Kindle Whites. The normal Kindle Paperwhites don't have any form of 3G or 4G connectivity anymore. The iPad mini is a different story. The base level iPad mini starts at £479, and for that you get the 64 gig version. That's what this one is. And if you spec it all the way up, you'll pay as much as £760 for this iPad mini. And in terms of positioning, the Kindle Paperwhite is an e-reader. It's made to read books on. That's pretty much it. There is other stuff on here, which I'll get onto later, but it's an e-reader, as simple as that, always has been. And the iPad mini is a fully fledged tablet. But the way you can turn this into a Kindle, obviously, is by downloading the Amazon Kindle app, which is very good. So, very different price-wise, very different in terms of positioning, but what about the devices themselves? So if we look at the screen of these two devices, the Kindle Paperwhite uses what is called an e-ink display. I won't get into the weeds with this because one, I don't understand them, and two, I don't really care, but it is basically a form of screen technology which acts almost identically to the page of a book. And if you've never used a Kindle before, and when you first set your eyes on the display, it's quite surprising because it genuinely does look like a book. Now it's very difficult to see that on this camera, as you can guess, but you do need to get one in your hand to kind of appreciate it really, and it's just very easy on the eyes. This one does have backlighting as well, so you can read it in the dark, which is very nice. It gets very bright, no problems there. The only issue with it is it has to redraw the screen every time you change the page or go to a different part of the operating system, and doing that is quite slow. So you can perhaps see here, once I start going through, it's not the smoothest experience really, but that's all to do with e-ink itself. It's the technology. It's not an LCD screen. It can't refresh at the same rate that the iPad mini does. It's just the way it works. But in terms of Kindle screens, I've been really impressed with this. There's a bit of ghosting, so every time you change the page, you can sometimes see the remnants of the old page there. The iPad mini, on the other hand, is a typically lovely iPad screen. It's Retina, obviously, so very sharp. It's got P3 color, so the colors are very vibrant. And although it suffers from jelly scrolling, which I did talk about in my full review of this, which I'll leave a link to above, it's just a wonderful screen. And going back to the jelly scrolling thing, if you're just going to use this as a Kindle book mainly, then you're not going to notice it. That is unless you turn on continuous scrolling, where you can kind of treat the book as a web page, but I wouldn't recommend that anyway. Weight-wise, the Kindle Paperwhite is 205 grams and the iPad mini is 293 grams. But actually, in the hands, they feel almost identical. There's a bit more weight there, obviously, but they're both very, very light devices, and that obviously makes them perfect for reading. In terms of waterproofing, the Kindle is IPX8 waterproof rated, so you can read it in the bath or at the pool without worrying too much about it. The iPad mini has no official waterproof rating. iPads have never had waterproof ratings, and it's probably going to be a long time before they do. For that reason, I wouldn't ever read this in the bath or at the pool, personally. And in terms of overall build quality, the Kindle Paperwhite is kind of plastic, rubbery type plastic stuff. It's okay, it feels quite nice in the hand, it doesn't feel too slippy. It doesn't look particularly premium. And the back is an absolute fingerprint magnet, as you can possibly see there. It's just full of fingerprints. The iPad mini, on the other hand, does look far more premium. It's made of aluminium. It's obviously got glass on the front of it as opposed to the kind of whatever screen this is. I don't know if that is plastic. Maybe it is glass, I have no idea, but it's definitely glass on the iPad mini. It's just a more premium device, and for that reason, you're probably more likely to put this in a case than you are the Kindle Paperwhite. Now, I've had the iPad mini for a number of months now, and I do use one of their folio cases, which keeps it in good condition. I also have a paper-like screen protector on there. Link in the description for those, they are fantastic. But it's held up pretty well, to be fair. It hasn't really got knocked at all. I look after it fairly well, but it gets chucked in bags and stuff. The Kindle Paperwhite, on the other hand, I've only had for 3 or 4 weeks, but already the writing on the back, so the kind of regulatory writing on the bottom of the device, it's starting to rub away. I don't know if you can see that. I haven't really done much with it, apart from put it in my bag occasionally and leave it on the bedside table, but I get the impression this won't wear particularly well. It feels quite solid, but iPads, generally speaking, are pretty robust. Now, the operating systems on both of these devices, iOS 15, very quickly. I mean, I've done, again, lots of videos about iOS and iPads in general. You can check out my previous videos. iPadOS is fantastic. It's fast, fluid, you're never left waiting for things. The Kindle, on the other hand, is a different matter entirely. All of this, pretty much, well, it's down to 2 reasons. One of them is because I don't think there's much of a processor in here. There's something in there, but it's not on a par with what is in the iPad. But also the screen technology. So going back to that e-ink display, it's not built to be fast or very responsive. And as a result of that, it feels very sluggish to use while you're browsing through your library and perhaps searching on the Kindle store. It's almost a little bit unnerving at times as well. So when you're scrolling through the book, or if you're kind of swiping up and down on the store, there's always a slight delay between you pressing your finger on the screen and something happening. And for that reason, you quite often correct yourself for no reason whatsoever and end up going into something that you don't want to go into. It's just a bit of a strange, frustrating, sluggish experience. But it does come with the territory of a Kindle, so I can't really be too hard on it. That's just the way it works. There is a web browser on here, which is hilariously bad. Why Amazon put a web browser on the Kindle, I have no idea. It's completely unusable. No websites are compatible with it. It's just an utterly pointless addition. I don't know, maybe they've left it on there just for a laugh. I have no idea. But I also think there's a benefit to how bad the operating experience is on the Paperwhite, and that leads us onto the reading experience. Kindles are made for you to read things on. It's the entire point of their existence. So it shouldn't surprise you to hear that the reading experience on the new Kindle is absolutely superb. And I think that's for 3 reasons. The first one is that e-ink display, which looks like a book and is very easy on the eyes. The second is the operating system experience, which is so bad you don't want to use it. You just want to get straight into reading as quickly as possible. And the third thing is the reading at night experience. Now, I do most of my reading in bed at night when my girlfriend's asleep, and I don't want to disturb her. And one of the key things I look for any reading experience where you're using them at night, in bed and in a dark room, is how low you can adjust the screen brightness. Now, on the iPad mini, you can adjust it fairly low, but even at its lowest setting, it's still relatively bright in a completely pitch black room. And yes, on iPadOS 15, you can turn on dark mode as well. That brings it down a notch dimmer as well, but it's still fairly bright. But that isn't the case with the Kindle. The Kindle goes really, really dim and remains legible. And if you turn dark mode on this, it gets even dimmer, and still it's easy to read, it's easy on your eyes, and crucially, you don't wake up your better half. So reading at night, this wins hands down. In terms of the tools it gives you, now you get pretty much the same reading tools on both the Kindle Paperwhite and also the Kindle app on the iPad mini. So you get quick access to things like screen brightness, dark mode, your notes, highlights, all that stuff is pretty much within reaching distance very quickly on both of these devices. Highlighting text on both devices is pretty much the same, to be honest. Okay, again, there's a bit of lag involved with the operating system on the Kindle, but the process of highlighting a piece of text on both devices is pretty straightforward. It's just more responsive, as you would expect, on the iPad mini. The one feature that is missing from the iPad OS version of the Kindle app compared to the Kindle Paperwhite is something called WordWise. And WordWise is this really cool little feature where it displays a definition of each word above the word on the page that you're reading. And WordWise is available obviously on the Kindle itself and weirdly on the Android version of Kindle, but it's not available on the iPad OS version. And the only other difference really to bear in mind when it comes to reading and actually using it as a Kindle is the fact that you can buy Kindle books on here very, very easily. It's built into the Kindle operating system, but you can't buy Kindle books on the iPad via the Kindle app. In terms of ergonomics for reading, they're both very good in that respect. They have similar sized bezels, so you can get your thumb there if you need to without kind of interfering with the screen. The only area where the Kindle scores slightly higher than the iPad mini when it comes to ergonomics is this little chin it has at the bottom of the device. So if you like holding your books like that, it's just easier to do that on the Kindle Paperwhite than it is on the iPad mini. But the biggest difference between these two devices when it comes to the reading experience is distractions or lack of them. Now, obviously the Kindle Paperwhite doesn't have any distractions. And again, because the operating system is so slow and unresponsive, you don't want to do anything on this apart from read, so it's completely distraction free. The iPad mini, as you would guess, is a completely different kettle of fish. This is a tablet, so it's going to always be trying to divert your attention to something else. Now the good thing is with iPadOS 15, you can set up what are called focus modes, and that enables you to customize the iPad so it doesn't disturb you and doesn't send you notifications during your reading time. And that's fine, but even with focus modes, you're always aware that behind the scenes on this, there's a whole world of apps, the internet, your mates, social media. It's all still there and very easy to access. So distractions, there's no competition. If you are easily distracted, you need to get yourself a Kindle. When it comes to battery life, there is a huge difference between these two devices. The Kindle Paperwhite is rated at up to 10 weeks of battery. It also charges via USB-C, which gets my thumbs up. The iPad mini, on the other hand, has iPad-like battery life, as you would expect, which is about 10 hours of what they call web surfing or viewing videos. Again, this charges via USB-C. Good stuff. But the reason the Kindle is so good with its battery is because one, it doesn't have a proper operating system behind it. Two, the screen technology doesn't rely on lots of LEDs and LCD technology, and it can just go and go and go on the battery. The biggest thing with this, I think, is the standby time. And I talk a lot about this with tech. Standby time with batteries is the most important thing, I think. It just offers ultimate convenience because you always know pretty much that this device is going to be charged. So if you want worry-free, convenient battery performance, you cannot beat the Kindle. The iPad mini is still good, there's no denying it. And to be honest, if you're only going to use this as a reading device, you'll probably get more than 10 hours out of it. And remember, those 10 hours can spread out across a week as well. The standby performance, in my experience with the iPad mini, is really good. Not on a par with the Kindle, but it's very good for a tablet that has this much power in it. This will always knock the iPad mini into a cocked hat when it comes to battery performance. So if that is a really big consideration for you, you have to get the Kindle. So in terms of a conclusion for this, I think it's actually quite straightforward. If you want an all-in-one reading device and you're worried about distractions, get yourself a Kindle. However, if battery life isn't a huge concern for you and you're not too bad with distractions and you want an all-in-one tablet that can do pretty much everything as well as be a great e-reader, then the iPad mini 6 really does take some beating. I think at both their price points and the way that they are positioned in the market, these are both really good investments for the right sort of people. If you're a bit of a bookworm and you're not that fussed about the latest tech, you'll get years of enjoyment from the Kindle. Whereas if you're a bit more of a casual reader, but you don't want to miss out on the brilliant Kindle reading experience, and you also want a much more wholesome device, then again, the iPad mini 6 is a great investment. Lastly, if you're a nighttime reader like me and you share the room with someone else who's possibly asleep, get yourself the Kindle. Now, if you're swaying in the direction of the iPad mini 6 for your e-reading duties, keep watching for a link to the full review that I did of this tablet a little while ago. But in the meantime, thank you as always for watching, and I'll catch you next time.